The ground beneath 10-year-old Leo's feet wasn't just vibrating. It was alive. The air didn't just smell like air. It tasted of gasoline, burnt rubber, and roasted pork. Leo stood at the edge of the county fairgrounds, a small, trembling figure in a faded blue hoodie, staring into the mouth of what looked like a mechanical beast. 500 motorcycles were parked in rows that stretched as far as he could see, their chrome reflecting the harsh midday sun like mirrors. To most people, the annual Thunder Run was a spectacle. To Leo, it was the only place left to hide. He looked over his shoulder. 3 older boys, teenagers with cruel eyes and knuckles bruised from previous fights, were pacing at the main gate, scanning the crowd. They were waiting for him. They had promised him that if he tried to walk home, he wouldn't make it to the corner. Leo swallowed a lump of fear that felt like a stone in his throat. He turned back to the sea of leather and denim. He took a shaky step forward, walking straight toward a giant man sitting on a black Harley-Davidson that looked like it weighed more than a car. The man was terrifying, beard like steel wool, arms the size of tree trunks covered in ink, and a face that looked carved from granite. Leo stopped inches from the man's boot, looked up with watery eyes, and whispered the words that would change his life. "Excuse me, mister. Can you pretend I belong here, just for a little while, before we see what happens next? If you believe that true heroes often wear the strangest disguises, please hit that like button and subscribe to Biker Stories right now. It helps us bring you more powerful tales of justice." The giant biker, whose road name was Grizz, stopped wiping down his gas tank. The rag in his hand paused mid-circle. He slowly lowered his sunglasses, revealing eyes that were surprisingly weary, etched with the kind of crow's feet that come from staring into too many sunsets and seeing too many things go wrong. He looked down at the boy. Leo was shaking so hard his sneakers were practically vibrating against the asphalt. Grizz didn't speak immediately. In the world of the Iron Guardians Motorcycle Club, silence was a language of its own. It was an assessment. He looked at the boy's frayed hoodie, the scuff marks on his knees, and the fresh, red mark on his cheek that looked suspiciously like a slap. "Pretend you belong here," Grizz repeated, his voice a low rumble that seemed to come from the engine of his bike rather than his throat. He didn't sound angry, just confused. He looked past Leo, his eyes narrowing as he scanned the entrance gate. He saw them, 3 teenagers, leaning against a chain-link fence, laughing and pointing. Predators waiting for a gazelle to leave the safety of the herd. Grizz knew that look. He had seen it in prison yards, in war zones, and in schoolyards 40 years ago. It was the universal look of the bully, the coward who only feels tall when standing on someone else's neck. Grizz set his rag down on the seat. He stood up, unfolding his 6'4" frame until he towered over Leo, casting a long shadow that shielded the boy from the sun. The teenagers at the gate stopped laughing. They straightened up, watching. Grizz looked back down at Leo. "What's your name, little man?" "Leo," the boy whispered, gripping the straps of his backpack so tight his knuckles were white. "Well, Leo," Grizz said, reaching into the saddlebag of his bike, "the thing about the Iron Guardians is, we don't like pretending. We prefer the real thing." Leo's heart sank. He thought he was being told to leave. He took a step back, ready to bolt, ready to face the beating waiting for him at the gate. But Grizz wasn't shooing him away. He pulled out a black leather vest. It was smaller junior cut that belonged to his own grandson who visited on weekends. It had the patches. It had the rocker. It smelled of leather and oil and safety. "Put this on," Grizz commanded gently. Leo hesitated, then slipped his arms into the heavy leather. It was too big for him, hanging down to his knees, swallowing his small frame. But the moment the weight settled on his shoulders, something strange happened. The wind stopped cutting through his thin hoodie. The noise of the rally didn't feel chaotic anymore. It felt like a wall of sound protecting him. "Zip it up," Grizz said. Then he turned to the group of bikers sitting at the picnic table behind him. "Boys, looks like we got a new prospect. Name's Leo. He's riding with me today." The men at the table, tough, weathered men with road names like Tank, Dutch, and Stitches, looked up. They saw the terrified kid wearing Grizz's grandson's vest. They saw the bullies at the gate. And instantly, without a word being exchanged, they understood the assignment. Tank, a man with a braided beard and a laugh that sounded like a rock crusher, stood up and wiped barbecue sauce from his mouth. "A new prospect," Tank shouted, loud enough for half the rally to hear. "Well, don't just stand there, brother. Get the kid a soda. Matter of fact, get him a burger. Prospect needs to eat." For the next hour, Leo entered a world he had only seen in movies. But it was nothing like the movies. It wasn't scary. It was a sanctuary. Grizz walked him through the rows of bikes, his heavy hand resting protectively on Leo's shoulder. He explained the engines, the difference between a panhead and a shovelhead, the history of the club. Every time they passed a group of bikers, Grizz would introduce Leo. "This is Leo. He's with us." And every single time, the terrifying-looking men and women would smile, nod, or offer a fist bump. Leo felt himself growing taller. The fear that had been gripping his stomach began to loosen, replaced by a warmth he hadn't felt since his father left 3 years ago. He wasn't the weird kid with the second-hand clothes anymore. He was a prospect. He was with the Iron Guardians. But the real test was yet to come. The bullies at the gate hadn't left. In fact, they had grown bolder. Seeing Leo walking on with the bikers, they assumed it was a joke. They assumed the bikers were mocking the kid, dressing him up like a mascot. Kyle, the leader of the teenage group, decided to push his luck. He and his two friends unlatched the gate and walked into the rally. They moved with the arrogant swagger of kids who had never been told no. They weaved through the crowd, heading straight for the picnic table where Leo was sitting with Grizz and Tank, finishing a cheeseburger. Leo froze. The burger turned to ash in his mouth. He saw Kyle approaching. The old fear came rushing back, paralyzing him. He tried to shrink inside the leather vest, tried to disappear. "They're here," Leo whispered, his voice trembling. "They're coming." Grizz didn't turn on. He took a slow sip of his coffee. "I know, Leo. Keep eating." Carl stopped at the end of the table. He didn't look at the bikers. He looked only at Leo. "Hey, freak," Carl sneered, ignoring the massive men sitting inches away. "Nice costume. You think playing dress-up is going to save you? Give me the backpack. Now, you know you ass." Their audacity was stunning. The entire immediate area went silent. The laughter died down. The revving of engines seemed to pause. Everyone was watching. This is the moment where everything hangs in the balance. The moment where a child learns how the world really works. What would you do in this situation? If you saw a child being threatened by bullies in front of you, would you step in, or would you mind your own business? Let us know in the comments below. Grizz set his coffee cup down. The sound of the ceramic hitting the wooden table echoed like a gunshot in the silence. He turned his head slowly, his sunglasses reflecting Kyle's arrogant face. "You talking to my brother?" Grizz asked softly. Kyle blinked. He looked at Grizz, then back at Leo. "You're... what? No, look, this kid is a loser. He goes to my school. I'm just getting what's mine. Is that right?" Tank stood up, then Dutch stood up, then Stitches. Round them, other bikers who had been listening began to stand. It was a ripple effect, a wave of leather and denim rising like a tide. Within seconds, 50 men were standing in a semicircle behind Leo. They didn't shout. They didn't pull weapons. They didn't threaten violence. They simply existed. They stood with their arms crossed, their faces unreadable, creating a wall of humanity that blocked out the sun. Kyle's arrogance evaporated instantly. He looked at the wall of men. He looked at the scars, the tattoos, the sheer physical power radiating from them. He took a step back. We were just joking, Kyle stammered, his voice cracking. Grizz stood up last. He moved around the table and stood next to Leo. He put his hand on Leo's head. See, the thing is, Grizz said, his voice carrying through the crowd, Leo isn't just a kid. Today, he's a king. He's the king of this rally. And you don't demand things from a king. You bow. I didn't know. Kyle squeaked out double quotes now you know, Grizz said. And here's the other thing about the Iron Guardians. We have long memories. We remember faces. And if I hear that King Leo here had a bad day at school, if I hear he tripped, or lost his lunch money, or even looked a little sad, I'm going to assume it was you. And then me and my 50 friends here might just have to come visit your school for a little show and tell. Do we understand each other? Carl turned pale white. He looked like he was going to be sick. He nodded frantically, unable to speak. His friends were already backing away, terrified. Good, Grizz said. Now run. They didn't just run. They scrambled. They tripped over their own feet in their haste to get to the gate, fleeing as if the hounds of hell were snapping at their heels. The entire rally watched them go, and then, as one, the bikers erupted into laughter and cheers. Leo sat there, stunned. He looked at Grizz. You called me king. Grizz smiled, a real smile this time, one that reached his eyes. You stood your ground, kid. You didn't run when they came up to the table. That's bravery. That's what makes a king. But the day wasn't over. Grizz wasn't done. Hey, he shouted to the crowd. Who wants to escort the king for a victory lap? A roar of approval went up. Grizz lifted Leo up not onto the back of the bike, but onto the front seat of his massive Harley. He sat behind Leo, reaching out on him to grab the handlebars. Hold on to the center of the bars, Leo. Feel the bike. Leo grabbed the chrome. Grizz hit the starter. The engine roared to life beneath him, a powerful, thumping vibration that shook his entire body. It wasn't scary anymore. It felt like power. It felt like freedom. They led a parade. Grizz and Leo in the front, followed by Tank, Dutch, and 100 other bikers. They rode slowly on the perimeter of the fairgrounds. People cheered. Kids waved. Leo waved back, feeling the wind on his face, feeling the warmth of the sun, feeling the heavy leather vest hugging him tight. For the first time in his life, he wasn't the victim. He wasn't the target. He was leading the pack. As they circled back to the entrance, Leo saw his mother running toward the gate. She looked frantic, terrified, having probably heard from a neighbor that Leo walked toward the rally. She stopped dead when she saw the column of motorcycles approaching. Her hands flew to her mouth. Grizz slowed the bike to a stop right in front of her. He killed the engine. The silence returned, but it was a peaceful silence now. Leo's mom ran forward. Leo, oh my God, are you okay? Leo looked at his mom. He looked at the vest he was wearing. He looked back at Grizz, who gave him a subtle wink. I'm okay, Mom, Leo said, his voice steady and strong. I was just hanging out with my friends. Grizz dismounted and helped Leo down. He knelt in front of the boy. All right, King. Ride's over for today. Leo started to take off the vest. He didn't want to. He wanted to live in it forever. He slowly unzipped it, sadness creeping back into his eyes. He handed it to Grizz. Grizz took it, folded it, and then handed it back. Keep it, Grizz said. Leo's eyes went wide. Really? It's a loaner, Grizz winked. You keep it safe for me. Hang it in your room. Look at it when you're feeling scared. Remind yourself who you rode with today, and whenever you need us, you put it on. We'll know. Leo hugged the vest to his chest. He looked at the giant man. Thank you for pretending. Grizz shook his head. I told you, kid, we don't pretend. You're part of the pack now. Leo's mom was crying, silent tears of relief and gratitude. She looked at Grizz, a man she would have crossed the street to avoid yesterday. Thank you, she whispered. He's had a hard time lately. Not any more, ma'am, Grizz said, tipping his head respectfully. He's got back up now. As Leo and his mom walked away, Leo didn't look down at his shoes. He walked with his head up. He walked like a king. He knew that come Monday morning, things would be different, not because the bullies had vanished, but because he had changed. He knew that behind him, just a phone call away, was an army of iron and leather that had his back. The bullies never bothered Leo again. The rumor at school spread that Leo was the nephew of the Iron Guardian's president. Nobody dared to test if it was true, but more importantly, Leo never acted like a victim again. He carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who had ridden the thunder. This story reminds us that sometimes, the family we need isn't the one we are born into. It's the one we find in the strangest of places. It reminds us that appearances can be deceiving. The world saw a gang of dangerous outlaws. Leo saw fathers, brothers, and protectors. He saw heroes. We live in a world that loves to judge. We judge by clothes, by tattoos, by the noise people make. But the Iron Guardians showed that the truest measure of a person is how they treat the smallest among them. They didn't have to stop. They didn't have to care. But they did. They turned a terrified boy into a king, simply because they could. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to Biker Stories for more powerful stories about courage, redemption, and the families we choose.